So we're learning the Torah portion of Chukas, which is about the red heifer. At least it starts with the red heifer. And the Ohr Hachaim has some beautiful insights onto um, the meaning of impurity and the concept of how the laws of impurity came about when Hashem gave us the Torah. And so we're going to jump right into this. The Ohr Hachaim begins with the first verse, and the second verse, I should say. The first verse says, Vayedaber Hashem, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, but the second verse says, this is the choik of the Torah. This is the statute of the Torah. Now, if you asked, if you were considering writing about the laws of the Torah, you would probably make that plural, like there's 613 statutes. This is the statute of the Torah. What does that mean, really? That this is the statute. If you wanted to say this is the statute of the laws of purity or the laws of impurity, that would be understandable. But the wording in the Torah is this is the statute of the Torah. Like this is the general rule of the whole Torah. Everything else is like almost like an offshoot from the laws of purity and impurity, but which we don't know of such a thing. That's not correct, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like this is the law. Everything else maybe or is secondary to this or is an offshoot of this, or that's what it sounds like. Anyway, the Ohr Hachaim doesn't give all these options. He just says, why are we calling it the name that this is the Klolos HaTorah? It sounds like he means what that idea that it sounds like this is the general law, the general title, and he doesn't say what the other laws would be, but it sounds like they would be secondary maybe to this, or they would be possibly offshoots of this. Now, the Ohr Hachaim continues, and he says that you may think that what it means is that this is the statute that you need in order to study Torah, meaning you can't be impure and study Torah. So that would be maybe a way of translating it. Again, the Ohr Hachaim is trying to figure out what options there are to explain the meaning of this. This is the statute of the Torah and the laws. And I should mention what it talks about. I'm not sure if Rabbi Citron already talked about it, but basically what the Torah does begin talking about in this week's portion is the laws of how a person that touches a dead body or is in the same tent as a dead body, or makes a tent over, like hovers over a dead body, touches, carries, all different types of ways of contracting impurity. And how does he purify himself to be able to enter the temple, bring sacrifices, eat from the sacrifices, eat holy things, and basically become pure again, be able to bring the Paschal offering, other offerings. All these laws are dependent on being pure. And if a person is not pure, they're limited. They're limited in what they could do. They can't deal with holy things. People stay away from them, especially Kohanes, and so on. So these are the laws that it talks about. Because a person touches a dead body, they have a complicated type of impurity, and they need to be purified through a period of 7 days, being sprinkled with the ashes of it's a mixture of water and ashes and some other items that are used in order to make the mei chatos. It's called the mei para. It's also called the water of the heifer, the water mixed with the ashes, which basically is a red heifer is slaughtered and then burned. and the mixed with water and some other things, and they ultimately sprinkle it on the person on the third day and on the seventh day, and finally the person is purified after that night. He goes to mikvah, and then he's then that night, and he is pure. So, um, so that's what it's talking about, and of course, this is what the Torah calls the chayk, and what the Ohr Hachaim is bothered with is why is this called the chayk of the Torah? Why is it the general chayk of the whole Torah? So you may say, well, what it means is this is the chayk that allows you to read, to study Torah. It knows if you get sprinkled and you get purified, then you'd be allowed to study Torah. Until then, you're impure and you can't study Torah. The Ohr Hachaim says that's not halachic because that's not the law. There's no such law. If you're impure, you're allowed to study Torah. You can. That's not an issue. And the Ohr Hachaim even mentions even a person that has a like a wet dream and things like some type of a mission would be allowed to study Torah, and even those that maybe would be strict with praying and so on, but they would allow such a person to study Torah. So there's no source to explain it that way. And then the Ohr Hachaim gives his explanation. And his explanation is based on the fact that a non-Jew does not contract tumah, does not become impure. A Jew can become impure, a non-Jew can't. So what that means is that a non-Jew touches a dead body, he stays pure afterwards. And a Jew is different. Now, just mention to you a practical application of this, and that is that I remember growing up, we didn't like to go to a store that the guy that worked at the produce was Jewish, because if he was Jewish, he didn't wash Negelwasser in the morning. Negelwasser is when after you wake up, you're supposed to wash your hands 6 times, on the right and on the left, and on the right and on the left, on the right, on the left, 6 times consecutively. And you become purified from the sleep, which is a taste of death. And so there's an impurity that a person gets overnight and through sleep. And so you're supposed to wash your hands before you touch any food. It becomes impure. And so I recall we used to try to only go to stores that had non-Jews that would be the produce guy, instead of a store that had a Jewish produce guy, because unless he was religious, of course, and did washed his hands in the morning. If he wasn't religious, it created more problems because they probably touched the food and they made it impure. And the logic behind it is this week's the reason behind it is this week's Torah portion and what the Ohr Hachaim is touching on. The Torah portion doesn't bring out that idea that only Jews become impure with this impurity, but the Ohr Hachaim brings it out, and it's brought in halacha and such. The Rambam brings the Rambam that mentions it, that the non-Jew does not become a tamei mace, does not become impure from a dead body, and the Rambam writes that if he touches a dead body, if he carries a dead body, if he hovers over a dead body, he is as if he did not touch it. It's just as if an animal touched a dead body. The animal does not become impure if it's alive, and the person doesn't become impure if they're alive, if they're not Jewish. Only a Jew becomes impure. And he says, what's the reason? Why is that? Why would that be? Now, I must tell you before I continue, I gave you a practical difference, but I must tell you that there are leniencies. So it's not like everyone follows this ruling. officially, it's nice to be careful that your food should only be touched by a Jew that washes their hands every morning or every time they wake up 6 times. And before that, you should not really touch any food. You shouldn't eat any food until you say brachas, the morning blessings, and so on. Of course, that's the ideal. I say Shema first, but the halacha about touching food when a person is impure is brought in Shulchan Aruch. It's just, if the question is how strict do you have to be after the fact, and if you're not sure, do you have to be you're not sure if they touch this or they touch that, you're not sure if they wash their hands. It would be strange that they wash their hands 6 times, because it's not something that normal people do unless you're Jewish and you know of this law, unless you're religious and you know of that the halacha is the law of how to wash negelvasser, the morning washing of the hands. But anyway, I'm just giving an example so you get an idea that there is a difference between a Jew being tamei and a non-Jew does not become tamei. Now, that doesn't mean that a non-Jew that dies is not tamei, but it does mean that a non-Jew that's alive is not tamei. That's what we're talking about. A non-Jew that's alive. Now, a Jew that's alive could be tamei if he touches a dead body, if he does they are impure. Now, we in today's day and age, we're all impure from tamei mace, from the dead body, tuma, impurity, and it's not something that we can really purify ourselves with now. And the reason is because the Torah portion this week says you need the red heifer to do that, and the ashes from the red heifer to purify ourselves on the 3rd day and on the 7th day, and we don't have that. So we can't purify ourselves. We're going to wait till Mashiach comes, and he's going to, Betz Hashem, he's going to do the 10th para aduma, red heifer, and he's going to purify us from the impurity, the purity of death that we are all tamei from, we're all impure from. Now, so the Ohr Hachaim goes into this, and he says, what is the cause? At what point did the Jewish people start becoming impure from when they touched dead bodies? Where did this kick in? When did it start? So he says it came when we got the Torah. When we received the Torah, that's when the laws of impurity and the facts of becoming impure kicked in. We started becoming impure after we got the Torah. If we had touched the dead body before we got the Torah, we would not have been impure. But after we got the Torah, we become impure if we touch a dead body. And he says this would be the meaning of the Torah portion wording that it says, Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the choik. This doesn't mean this is the statute, which is the statute of the whole Torah. That's not what it means. It means this is the statute that came about from the Torah, from receiving the Torah. So in other words, we understood it wrong initially, and that's why we asked that question. Why would this law be the general rule of the whole Torah? Why should this law be that rule? This is the rule of the whole Torah, is the law of the red heifer? No. Ohr Hachaim says, no, that's not the meaning of it. This is the rule that started when we got the Torah. That's when Jewish people started becoming tamei, when they started becoming impure, when they touched the dead body. It came about when we received the Torah. Before we received the Torah, we had nothing to be concerned about, because we did not become tamei, impure, if we touched the dead body. But after we received the Torah, we started becoming impure. Now, why? So here comes an insight from the Ohr Hachaim that's touching on Kabbalistic ideas, but it's very understandable. And he says, that a Jewish person, after we receive the Torah, so all the powers of impurity are hungry, they're craving to attach themselves to the Jewish people in order that they will sort of live off of our holiness. We have a certain element of holiness and purity. We are a chativa of kedusha elyoina. How to translate that? We are a like a entity of holy, upper, sublime holiness. And now this applies in our lifetime and after we pass away. And this came about because we received the Torah. And because of this,
we are a battery.
Say that again.
A battery.
We're like a battery.
We hold the energy.
Okay. And others desire, are craving to come to us and absorb a little, get a little from it. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's a good word. Or we sort of feed. We have the ability to we have energy that they could take advantage of. And so this is applicable to the Jewish people from when we got the Torah. And the impurity, when we touch impurity, the impurity clings to us. It's hungry for us, and it doesn't want to separate. And how can you get that to separate from us? Only through the portion that we read called the para aduma, the red heifer. That's what's able to separate it. Otherwise, it grabs onto us and it won't leave. It just sucks our blood. It sucks our energy. And that's the impurity that comes about when a person, when there's someone when there's a dead body, so that impurity grabs onto us. And when a Jewish person dies, we also have more impurity. And that's why a Jewish person, according to all opinions, will cause impurity even to someone who's under the same tent. A non-Jew will cause impurity to someone who touches them, a Jew who touches them, but he won't cause impurity by being under the same tent. If a Jew carries a non-Jew or he touches a non-Jew that's dead, if he touches the body of a non-Jew or he carries the body of a non-Jew, he becomes impure. If he's under the same tent as a body of a non-Jew, he's not impure. But if he's under the same tent from a Jew who passed away, then the impurity will attach itself to the person under the same tent. And the reason is because there's a riboy tuma, there's a larger amount, there's an increase in impurity when a Jewish person dies than when a non-Jew dies, because the impurity tries to grab on to the Jew. There's much more of it, and somehow it causes it to be able to transmit in more ways that other corpses can't transmit impurity. And so that's the understanding of the law of impurity, of why it affects Jews more than it affects non-Jews in a number of ways. One is that non-Jews don't even become impure if they're alive. And then the other is, even if they're dead, they're not transmitting impurity if they're under the same roof, according to all opinions. Now, that's subject to a discussion, I should say. And the Ohr Hachaim is following the Rambam's view. That's why he mentions, that's why he's saying this. He's following the Rambam's view. In truth, the Ashkenazic halacha is that it's based on an argument of in the Mishnah, in which translates itself into an argument in the final halacha, final code of law between the Rambam and others. And Ashkenazic Jews follow that you can't go under the same tent. A Kohen would not be allowed to enter the same tent as a that there's a non-Jew Jewish corpse. But the way the Ohr Hachaim is explaining it, he's following the Rambam's view. According to the Rambam, a Kohen would be allowed to enter a room that has a Kohen would be allowed to enter. According to the Rambam, Kohen would be allowed to enter a room that has a non-Jewish corpse in it. And again, this all boils down to the fact that impurity grabs on to holiness. And the more holy something is, the more the impurity wants to grab onto it. The Ohr Hachaim gives an example here. He gives a parable. He says, if you have two containers, one was filled with honey, and the other was filled with waste, disgusting waste. And you emptied the containers and removed them from the room. All types of flies and swarming creatures, zevuvim and remusim, they will come and gather around the one that had the honey more than the one that had the waste, even though the one that had the waste, some will swarm there, but there will be much more. It won't be comparable to the amount that goes to the ones with the honey, because the swarming creatures are more attracted to that which is sweet. And the same thing applies to a Jewish person. Being that a Jewish person has a certain sweet, pleasant holiness to them. We're not necessarily talking about physically, it's more a spiritual thing, that we have a mesikos and a revos, we have a sweetness, a pleasantness to us, to our, in levels of holiness. We are malei kedusha, full of holiness, that's sweet and that's pleasant. So if a Jewish person passes away, the klipos, which means the powers of impurity, they gather to this body. They run to it. They swarm to it. And it says, Yiskabtzu haklipos la'ein ketz. There's be no end to the amount of impurities that crave to connect to this body. This is a very powerful idea. And because of that, he says, there's a halacha that the corpse will cause impurity to anyone under the same tent of it, because it has so much impurity that has grabbed onto it. And even if there's 1,000 roofed homes, one open to the next. So in other words, let's say you have a palace of 1,000 doors. The impurity will go from one room to the next. It'll continue. It'll cover the entire. It'll travel through the entire place, and that applies only to a Jew. But someone who's not Jewish doesn't. The impurity that the angel of death imparts to that person, if they're not Jewish, it's not powerful enough. It's not magnified enough. It's not. It doesn't have the ability to spread like that, at least according to the Rambam. Now, and the reason is because they don't have the holiness. So therefore, they don't have that impurity desiring to attach itself to their body. Now, however, there is a impurity to the non-Jew's body. So how does that happen? We just said it doesn't apply to the law of tent, but it will apply to the body of a non-Jew. They still have, if someone carries it, if someone touches it. So there is some type of impurity. So the Ohr Hachaim says the only impurity that affects it, that adheres to the body of a non-Jew, is the portion of the impurity that comes to him from the one who kills, the angel of death. That's what comes to the non-Jew, is only that. That's what stays and attaches itself to the non-Jew, meaning it doesn't have the extra impurities that come running to the dead body. It only has the impurity that came about when the angel of death killed this non-Jew. That's the only impurity that it has, and it sticks with it. And it's, of course, as we said before, it's not as powerful. It's not powerful enough to spread like the impurity of a Jew. And this gives us an explanation. The Ohr Hachaim says that when Hashem commanded the Jewish people to bring the Paschal offering, what's really interesting is God made certain laws that if you don't do this, you cannot bring the Paschal offering. This was in Egypt before they left. This was the night before they left. I mean, it started a few days before. They had to get a mishchu kulachem tzoin, go grab a sheep and tie it to your bedpost. And they had it for 4 days there. And then they ultimately slaughtered it, and they put the blood from it on their doorposts, and they put the blood from, and they also circumcised themselves. And so it says there was two things that the Jewish people needed to do in order to bring this Paschal offering. Now, we know that there's laws about offerings in the Beis Hamikdash, and we would expect there to be less laws when it's not in the Beis Hamikdash, true. But the Ohr Hachaim is interested in delving into, so why are there some laws that you still have? Like, for example, there's a law that the Paschal offering you cannot bring if you are uncircumcised. If a man is uncircumcised, he can't bring the Paschal offering. Another law that applies is that if a person worships idols, they can't bring the Paschal offering. This was in Egypt. There are two laws, major laws. They had to bring the Paschal offering, and they took the sheep, they tied it to their doorposts, and 4 days later they slaughtered it, and they put the blood on their doorposts. Right? This is of course, we all know a little about this from the story of in the Haggadah and so on. But the understanding is that only these two laws applied, but you were allowed to be impure. Like Hashem didn't say, go to the mikvah. Hashem didn't give us the law of the red heifer before we left Egypt and say, purify yourselves, guys, 7 days. Third day, do a sprinkling. Moses, you get this done. Go make the red heifer and make sure it's ready. I want all the Jewish people to purify themselves from impurities. That would make a lot of sense, because we know one of the main laws about bringing a sacrifice is you don't want to be impure. And so the Ohr Hachaim is using this explanation as a way of answering this, giving a good explanation of why there wasn't such a law to do the red heifer in Egypt and bring the Paschal offering when you're pure. Don't just bring it in your dirty clothing. Bring it when you're pure, not spiritually. Don't bring it when you're impure. Bring it when you're pure. And this, although the Ohr Hachaim acknowledges that it might not have been that easy to do, being in Egypt and so on, to command them to do this sprinkling of the red heifer on the third day and on the seventh day, and doing the whole red heifer, finding a red heifer, and so on. So although maybe it would have been a little complicated, and although there's also a leniency that Tumah is hutra b'tzibur, tuma is okay if the whole community is impure. So there's room to answer this question with alternative answers, but the Ohr Hachaim says, nevertheless, Hashem could have commanded them to do the para aduma, and Moses would have had to make the ashes of the red heifer, and nothing can prevent Hashem from doing what he pleases. So they could have done this. So even though, of course, you're right, you could have. There is a leniency here with the regard to bringing a sacrifice when everyone is impure regarding the Paschal offering. That you could actually bring it when everyone is impure, but nevertheless, if Hashem wants, he could have made it work, made it happen, and they could have brought the Paschal offering then. And Hashem did not command them to do it. He commanded them, don't bring the Paschal offering if you're uncircumcised. Don't bring it if you're worshiping idols. Mishchu kachulachem meant you have to draw your hands away from idol worship. And so there could have been a law of not being impure. Make sure to purify yourselves. And the answer is that according to the way we've explained it, it's not a problem because the Jewish people were not considered impure at the time. Why? Because they didn't get the Torah yet. The Torah would have been a reason, or the Torah is the reason why impurity kicks in. But before we got the Torah, then impurity didn't kick in. So we weren't impure, even though we had touched dead bodies. The Torah law did not apply yet because we didn't get the Torah yet. And again, so that's the Ohr Hachaim's main point here, to fit it with the wording in the Chumash, is to explain that Zois Chukas HaTorah, this is the statute that came about because we got the Torah and we now have impurity, we now have holiness that causes impurities to try to leech onto our body and connect here to our body, and we need to purify ourselves from these type of impurities. So before they got the Torah, when they were still in Egypt, there was no such impurities, and therefore they didn't have to worry about this and do the red heifer and so on. It was only applicable after they got the Torah. Now, what's the law of a non-Jew that converts? If a non-Jew converts and becomes Jewish right before Passover, so when they were a non-Jew, they definitely, we assume, or maybe they know, that they've touched the dead body. They never were purified with the red heifer ashes. We don't know if it'll work, even if they were, because they're not Jewish. But the fact is that what happens when a non-Jew converts? They have to be sprinkled with these red heifer ashes and wait a week before they can bring the Paschal offering? Or could they just bring it right away and not worry about the fact whatever happened when they were non-Jewish? So the law is that there is a difference between the way it was in biblical times and the way it was after the rabbis made a decree. The rabbis actually did make a decree that if a ger converts, if a non-Jew converts to Judaism, and he goes through the circumcision and he goes through the mikvah process, you cannot bring the Paschal offering, and because he needs to go through a purification. And what's the problem? The problem is because the next year, what's going to happen? If we don't make him wait and we just let him bring a Paschal offering right away, we are afraid that he's going to say, oh, last year when I wasn't Jewish, I didn't have to wait any time. I went to the mikvah. I went straight to bringing the Paschal offering. I did the circumcision, I went to mikveh, and I did the Paschal offering. So therefore, the rabbis enacted a decree that we have to wait, and that he might be impure, and he might need a week to become purified. He might need, and therefore, the law is that you don't let him go to go to the mikveh and bring the Paschal offering right away. Instead, there is a decree about this, about a non-Jew converting. But the Ohr Hachaim says that's only because of this decree, that we're afraid that the next year he might have touched a dead body and he won't know that you have to wait a week. However, before this decree of the rabbis, according to the letter of the law, a non-Jew that converts would be allowed to go right into bringing the Paschal offering, the same reason. And that's how the Jewish people were when they were in Egypt. We were converts, and we did not have to worry about all the corpses that we touched beforehand, because non-Jew does not become impure even when they touch a corpse. That only applies to a Jew touching a non-Jewish corpse. But a non-Jew that touches non-Jewish corpse, or a non-Jew that even touches a Jewish corpse, does not become impure, because the impurities don't run to attach themselves to the non-Jew. So therefore, they don't have any, there's no impurity. And that's the meaning of this law of Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the decree of a corpse, of tumah, of impurity, that's a consequence of Torah. Zois Chukas HaTorah, this is the consequence of the Torah. This chukah, this statute, is a consequence of the Torah. Yes, Ezra.
So suppose an individual does make this conversion, he can't bring it during Pesach, but can he bring it during Pesach Sheni?
I think he would, because biblically he was supposed to bring it on the first Pesach. So I think he would. Again, I'm not, I would have to look it up, but I think you're right. I think he would.
Okay. Thank you.
So what comes out here is that rabbinically, a convert that goes through their conversion, they would have to be sprinkled upon after they convert for the 7-day process. Third day and the 7th day, they get sprinkled on, and so on. And only after that can they deal with participating in anything that has to do with here we're talking about the Korban Pesach, in order to bring the Korban Pesach. I guess what would happen would be that the rabbis would make sure to convert them at least a week before, so they could go through the process in time for the Korban Pesach. Now, the Ohr Hachaim mentions that in a different sense of translating. So we've explained this concept of Zois Chukas HaTorah based on this Kabbalistic idea of impurity trying to attach itself to holiness. It's a very interesting concept. David, yes.
A woman, when she becomes, when she gives birth, the Torah says that she's impure. Is that impurity transferable to another person?
Of course. It's called a yoledus. Yeah, sure. It's a very serious type of impurity. Yep.
So, but if she wants to have relations with her husband,
Yep.
she can, because she's not going to make him impure, is she?
Well, after she gives birth, depends on if she gives birth to a boy or a girl. One of them, there's the impurity lasts for 7 days. The other impurity lasts for 14 days. And then after that, if she stops bleeding, she goes to, waits a week, goes to the mikveh, and then she is permissible to her husband. Now, if she continues bleeding afterwards, there is a law called dam toihar, which would be that even that there's a certain time that a woman bleeds, that she would be, even if she bleeds, she's pure. But according to the practical side of things, basically a woman after she gives birth, she's impure and she cannot be with her husband. Normally it's a number of weeks before she can be with her husband. But
so what is the thing with there's like a thing of 40 days and 80 days?
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
asking about a yoledus.
A yoledus.
which is 40 days and 80 days.
Yeah, but there's seven.
Right.
There's 7 days and 14 days, and then there's 33 days and 66 days. So if you add
Right.
7 to 33 is 40, and if you add 14 to 66 is 80. The 14 days or the 7 days, she's not allowed to be with her husband. Afterwards, according to the letter of the law, she would be permissible to be with her husband after she goes to mikvah from the first bleeding, from her the birth bleeding, labor bleeding. She would be allowed, even if she's bleeding, she would be allowed to be with her husband. We don't follow that nowadays.
Right. She'd
The
be allowed to
66
with her
days.
husband, but her husband becomes Tameh from the Yoledes.
Well, it's called dam toyhar. It's called dam
Okay.
toyhar. So the
Okay.
Yoledes applies the first week for a boy and the first 2 weeks for a girl. That's what you're referring to.
Uh-huh.
That would
And
be
the 33 days after,
the 33 days after is called dam toyhar
and he would
for a
become
boy.
Tameh from that.
No, they're allowed to be together. Yeah,
They're
allowed to
allowed
be
to
together.
because
Yeah.
when you say that she's Tameh, Dam Toar, if she touches something, it does not become Tameh?
Well, that's a good question because she never brought her sacrifices. She has to bring. She waits till afterwards to bring her sacrifices to be able to go to the Beis Hamikdash. So
Right.
there is laws of that, but the actual what he's asking about being with her husband, that type of impurity doesn't apply. After the 7 days or the 14 days officially would be over.
That's what I was asking. So she wouldn't have to not touch her husband for 80 days or 40 days.
Right. Although
Okay.
it would apply to, I mean, a woman, bleeds for 5-6 weeks. So even though, according to the letter of the law, they might be free, it might be free after a week or 2 weeks, but practically it ends up being 5 weeks or so. Anyway.
So she wouldn't be able to come to the Beis Hamikdash for those 80 days?
Right. And then she would bring her carbon, correct. It's called the Mechusar Kippurim. Right? She's not allowed to touch kodesh. She doesn't come to the Beis Hamikdash until Malois Yemei Tahara. Uvim Lois Yemei Tahara Levein Levas Tavi Kebes Ben Shnasei La'ila, and then she brings the sacrifices, and from that she's allowed to go to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, now getting back to what we were talking about, that's like a very side point here because we're not dealing with that type of impurity. There's all different types of impurities. There's the impurity that we're talking about is called tumas mace. It's an impurity of a dead body, and the impurity of a dead body is a very serious type of impurity because it involves 7 days of it being impure, and many other impurities like tumas nevela, tumas sheretz. They just last till the night. But this type of impurity is a 7-day impurity, and you need to have the red heifer. The other types of impurities do not need the red heifer. And so the impurity of a dead body, that's what we're dealing with here. And this impurity is based on the fact that a Jewish person has certain level of holiness, and the impurities try to attach themselves to that holiness. They're excited, they're craving to be connected to such holiness. And when a person touches the dead body, the impurities on the dead body jump on to the Jewish person, and they attach themselves to him. And he needs the red heifer to be able, the ashes of the red heifer are able to remove those impurities and take them off from being attached to the Jewish man, Jewish person. Okay, now I think it teaches us a very important thing. Like we have to realize how holy we are and how we should make sure not to give over, not to allow anyone to be taking advantage of the great holiness that we have, and to utilize all of our energy for holy things, being that we are blessed with all this holiness. It's almost like having $1 million and not investing it properly, and instead just sleeping on it in your mattress. But you have all this holiness, we have it all, and what are we doing with it? We're just wasting it away when we could have bought invested it in, in a reliable something safe, or we could have bought some real estate with it or something. And instead, you're just holding on to it. We have all this holiness, and there are people who are going to try to steal it from us unless we use it. And they're like the impurities that are trying to grab onto it. And we have to make sure to utilize all of this great holiness that we got from when Hashem gave us the Torah. Now, the next point the Ohr Hachaim makes is that another insight as to why it could say Zois Chukas HaTorah, this is the general choik statute of the Torah, is emphasizing that this is the choik that's considered like it's the whole Torah. If you fulfill a mitzvah that has no reason, so then the Torah considers it. In other words, if you fulfill a mitzvah that you can't understand the reason, it's beyond reason, it's beyond our understanding of reason, then the Torah considers it as if you fulfilled the entire Torah, meaning that by fulfilling a mitzvah that you don't understand, what you're emphasizing, what you're bringing out, you're expressing this idea that you have a willingness to observe all the mitzvahs of Hashem, and that is the proof is the fact that you're fulfilling this mitzvah that has no apparent reason or logic behind it. And Hashem specifically gave us this mitzvah to give us this opportunity. He gave it to us in a way of a chayk so that we would have this opportunity to demonstrate our faith in observing Hashem's mitzvahs, which ultimately gives us reward as if we fulfilled ki'ilu kimu haTorah. It's as if we fulfilled the entire Torah that Hashem and that would be a reason why it's called Zois Chukas HaTorah. It's interesting, the wording. It's as if we fulfilled the Torah that Hashem commanded us to say. It's as if we fulfilled the entire Torah that Hashem commanded us. Ki'ilu kimu haTorah asher tziva Hashem leimar. In other words, he's fitting it into the verse. Zois Chukas HaTorah asher tziva Hashem leimar. This is the chayk that's as if we fulfilled the Torah that Hashem commanded us to say. It's as if we fulfilled the entire Torah that Hashem commanded us to say. Now, that would be a second reason why it's called the chayk of the Torah. Now comes the next Ohr Hachaim. The next Ohr Hachaim says that what does it mean that Hashem commanded us to say? And he goes through a number of questions. And again, these are like grammar type of questions, or just the wording, the choice of words. So, for example, the first question he asked is, it's Asher Tziva Hashem Limor, that Hashem commanded to say. Now, of course, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, why does it have to say that Hashem commanded to say? Of course, we know that it's Hashem who's the one commanding it. Number two, why does it say that Hashem commanded instead of Hashem speaking directly, that I commanded? So we're talking like in third person. And number three, why does it say Lamar a second time? It says, if you want the actual wording, you'll see it says it twice. It says Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron to say, or saying. And then it says, this is the commandment, the statute of the Torah that Hashem commanded saying. says it twice, saying, or to say over. And what is the meaning of that? Why does it say it twice? Redundant. And the next question is that it has to stick in. This is the chayk of the Torah that Hashem commanded to say, speak to the Bnei Yisrael and tell them. Wouldn't that fit afterwards? After, speak to the Bnei Yisrael and tell them that this is the chayk, this is the statute of the Torah. Instead, it says it the wrong order, seemingly. It's obviously the right order, but it sounds like it's the wrong order, because why would it say, this is the statute of the Torah that Hashem commanded to say, now speak to the Bnei Yisrael. Include that in what you're going to say to the Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people. Include that. That should be mentioned afterwards. So these are 4 questions that the Ohr Hachaim says. And then he says that all the mitzvahs, there's mitzvahs sichliyos and shimiyos. Shimiyos. He coins these, the mitzvah sichliyos means logical mitzvahs, and then he coins another term called mitzvahs shimiyos. Shimiyos means mitzvahs that you received or you listened to. In other words, they're not logical. And the sichliyos mitzvahs he gives examples for are the mitzvah like honoring one's parents, not to steal, not to take interest, or do some type of fraud. Then it talks about murder. These are all included in mitzvahs that are logical. Then there's mitzvahs that are called shimiyos mitzvahs, from the word shema, shimiyos, or mishmas, which means to follow, to follow the command, shimiyos, and naaseh v'nishma. The shimiyos mitzvahs, that these are mitzvahs that their reason is not clearly understood, but we could understand it a little. We could, like Shabbos. What's the reason for Shabbos? Hashem rested. What's the reason for Yom Tov? A miracle happened, and therefore we're commemorating it. What's the reason not to worship idols? Hashem took us out of Egypt, and we are not allowed to serve any other. How could we serve any other God? Hashem commanded us, and all these other mitzvahs that, although maybe we wouldn't automatically say they're logical in the first place, but if Hashem commands them, then they seem to be easy to relate to and understand the why we should do it. So they're not what you would call sichliyos mitzvahs, but they're shimiyos mitzvahs. And he says, now, what we know as the reason for these mitzvahs is only the revealed reason. But obviously, there's a lot of deeper meaning behind them. And this is a very powerful idea that the Ohr Hachaim brings out here. He says that the hidden meanings were revealed to Moshe and to other people who are fitting to and worthy to attain the acquisition of the Torah, which takes 48 qualities in order to absorb the Torah. There's 48 qualities in the that are taught in Tractate Avos, and those 48 qualities are means. They're a sort of a gate in order to get the Torah, and people who have fulfilled them, who have attained them, they are eligible, similar to Moshe, to understand the deeper, the secretive meanings behind the Torah, the reasons of the Torah, the mitzvahs of the Torah, and then the Hashem reveals them to this person, just like he revealed it. What he revealed to Moshe, he reveals to this person. And Moshe also revealed to his generation secrets and the hidden secrets and the reasons of the mitzvahs. And that is the deeper reasons we're talking about. Rather, besides for the simple reasons, we're talking about even the deeper reasons. This is what some people are eligible to understand. Now, when it came to the mitzvah of para aduma, Hashem told Moshe, I gotta make an exception over here. Hashem told him, no. This, tell the Jewish people, is a chayk without a reason. And that is what you should tell the Jewish people. Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the decree of the Torah, which means Hashem told them to say this to them. This is a decree. And you are not supposed to get the reason for this. And so what that means is, why is Moshe being told to tell this to the Jewish people? Because obviously what it means is Moshe knew the reason for this also. And that's why he's being told. Otherwise, he doesn't know it anyway. So, of course, he can't give it to the Jewish people. I'm not telling you, I can't tell you the reason if I don't know it. But it sounds like from this, it's understandable that Moshe actually was told the reasons of the mitzvah. And but Hashem said, don't tell it to them. And this way, they're not going to beg you to understand it because you have a straight command. Hashem commanded that you should say it in a way that it's a decree. And by doing that, by explaining it that way, it answers a number of the questions that what he's being told by Hashem, it's not what he's, in other words, first he's told by Hashem, this is the, Hashem tells Moshe to say over, this is a chayk of the Torah, that this is the preface to the mitzvah that I'm about to tell you. First of all, this is a chayk. This is a statute with no reason that you're going to be able to know. And now let me tell you now Hashem says, and now tell them the mitzvah. And the mitzvah is the red heifer. So there's two parts to this mitzvah. One is the preface, the introduction. This is called the chayk. You ain't getting a reason for this. And number two, this is what the mitzvah entails, and that answers some of those questions that we had asked before about the actual wording and why is it placed there and why is lamar said twice. So you see why it's placed there. You see why lamar is mentioned twice, and that's what it means. Asher tziva Hashem lamar, that Hashem commanded, meaning Hashem commanded us to tell you only the mitzvah, but not the reason behind it. So the Ohr Hachaim continues, and he says that the mitzvahs are really supposed to be done with feeling, with understanding. Because if you do a mitzvah that's dry, then it's like a body without a soul. And it's much better to fulfill a mitzvah with understanding the reason, because you're passionate about it. And that's why Hashem tells him to speak to the Bnei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people, and they shall take to you a red heifer. Now, why are they taking the red heifer to Moshe? Elazar, one of the Kohanes, was supposed to be the one to prepare the red heifer. So what are they taking it? The yikhu elecha, they should take it to you, a red heifer, is because you know the reason of this. This is a very powerful idea. You know the reason of it. We don't know the reason, but we're going to do it having you in mind. This is a very Hasidic insight into this, because what it means is that you're sort of like looking up to your Rebbe who knows the meaning behind it, and you're saying, I know you know the reason. We're doing it. Hashem, please connect these two, connect the reason of the mitzvah with the mitzvah itself. We're doing the mitzvah part, but we're doing it following your orders, Moshe Rabbeinu. Of course, following Hashem, but we're following and somehow we want to connect the reasoning, your thoughts, with our actions. And he says that Yikhu Lamasha ata yodea, speak to the Bnei Israel, they should take to you the red heifer, meaning connect to your intentions, that being that you know the secret of this mitzvah, and by doing this, the mitzvah will be bishleimus. It'll be a complete mitzvah with action and with the necessary thoughts, intentions. And that's the meaning of the vav, the yikhu, that it's and take, because the vav implies that in addition to actually taking the red heifer, that they should also take the intentions that Moshe Rabbeinu knows and take that along with it. And that applies not only to the red heifer of that generation, but it applies to the red heifer of all future generations. And the reason would be that it wasn't only it wasn't only Moshe who got the secret, but there were also other people. Just in general, no one was supposed to get the reason, but there were some special individuals, and they in turn will transmit it to exceptional individuals who followed them, and they would be allowed to know the reason, and they would be able to have the intent, or possibly that every generation should have in mind that they're fulfilling the mitzvah in accordance with what Moshe Rabbeinu knew when he did the red heifer. So having that in mind is good enough. And the Ohr Hachaim brings a medrash. Again, this is a very powerful idea that even though you're not having the right intention, but you're having the intention, whatever my teacher is thinking, and the one who's my Rebbe, my leader is thinking, that should be, we're following his command. It's whatever he's thinking, that's what we're having in mind. No, that's good enough. That's considered like intention, because that we understand that this is a very important thing. I don't happen to know the specific reason, but it's good enough in my eyes. I'm excited to do it because it's my teacher who's commanding it. He knows what the reason is. That's enough of a passion for me. That gives me enough passion to be able to do it. The Ohr Hachaim doesn't emphasize that idea, but that's what it sounds to me, at least. That's what it seems like. That I could still have the passion from the fact that the fact that I'm connecting. I feel connected to my leader, that I'm able to include passion with this mitzvah, even though I don't know the reason. Normally, you need to know the reason for that. And just to conclude, so he says over here that I find support from this, from a medrash. It says that the yikhu elecha, they should take to you that all the red heifers that are going to be made are going to be called on your name, Moshe. And why is that? What does that mean? What's the meaning behind that? It's called for Moshe's red heifer. They're all called Moshe's heifer. And this is maybe the reason that it's called Moshe Rabbeinu's red heifer, because all the red heifers, you have in mind that it's Moshe Rabbeinu, it's Moshe who commanded us to do them. So anyway, these are a few beautiful little insights into the meaning of impurity and into the concept of mitzvahs that are understanding the reason and not understanding the reason. Moshe understood the reason. Special people who got the Torah, for certain special people who are privileged to receive the reasons because they prepared themselves with all the 48 ways that it says in Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, and ultimately having in mind your leader, that allows you to be considered as if you had the kavana, the right kavana. I will just mention that there is a concept like this when it talks about certain things that are done based on Kabbalistic reasons. So it's mentioned, it's brought down in Holy Svarim that you have in mind, even though I don't know the reasons, but I'm having in mind whatever kavanas I'm supposed to have, that should be accepted. It should be considered as if I had in mind those reasons, meaning that you include your thoughts. This is not just an empty action. There's thought involved. I happen not to know the reason, but I'm sure and I'm convinced that this is appropriate, and that's considered good enough. You're able to connect with those reasons. Okay. Anyway, Sei gesund, everyone.
Rabbi.
For the class. Yes, David.
I don't know if you mentioned this. I stepped away for a few minutes. But the connection between the paradum red cow and the golden calf.
I didn't, because, I mean, of course, it's a big topic of discussion. Yeah. the connection that one comes to atone for the other. Yeah.
Yeah, so Rashi brings this down that the red cow came and atoned for the incident of the golden calf.
Right. The mother comes and atones for the child. Yeah.
So the Balatorium says that the gematria, the numerical value of para aduma, is 335, which is equivalent to that of al avon ho'egel. This is for the sin of the calf. I thought that was very interesting. Not only the concepts are connected, but the gematria is connected.
Yeah. No, that's nice. Yeah, sure. Shkoyach. That's great. That's great. Did you want to share one more?
Yeah, let me see. I didn't think I was going to get the chance, so I was like letting them go, but
they could unaware.
Where in the chapter 20, where it talks about Miriam passed away.
Yeah.
So it says that Miriam died there, Shum. So why did it have to say Shum there? She died. Why did it say Shum? So one thing he says is the word Shum is the gematria of Isser B'Hana. It's it's forbidden regarding benefits. That there's a connection between Miriam's death and the decapitated calf, just as it's forbidden to derive benefit from the calf's body, so it's forbidden to derive benefit from a human corpse. That's brought down from a Vaidazara. But he says the gematria is equivalent also.
Gematria is equivalent. Very nice. Okay, shkoyach. Have a good evening, everyone. Don't see you tomorrow. Have a good Shabbos. Okay.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Yeah. Okay.